but I'll make sure that it isn't. I've been researching deeply self-service for the last 3 years, and I can tell you it's been a road to Damascus for me, in as much as in the early days, I could understand the benefits of self-service, but chose not to engage with it. But along the way, I've actually discovered the true benefits of self-service, and I'd like to share that with you. And indeed, the research that I've done, along with my peers in Box Technologies and peers in the industry as well, have created a community of practice that's growing and growing. So some of this information will be relevant to today. I can talk for hours on this subject. So I've got some people strategically placed around this room to give me the nod to move on and ensure you guys can get out and drink some coffee and tea and stretch your legs. Okay, but please feel free to grab me after the presentations today, and I'll talk your legs off. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the concept of what is self-service, and I'm going to position it in a global sense so you can all understand what self-service has probably meant to you in the past, and I'm talking the last 100 years. I'll focus on some of the current state of the art because I think that's really important. In retail, there's a dramatic focus on self-service that wasn't there 5 years ago, and I think there's some great things that are out there right now, and you just really ought to know about them. We'll then move on to the strategy of self-service and how any organisation can benefit from self-service in whatever form factor, whatever multi-channel platform you would choose to use self-service within. And then I'm going to rewind a little bit and I'm going to talk about the origins of self-service, and this is kind of the nerd in me coming out. But I found this bit of research fascinating and I wanted to share it with you guys. Then moving on to the idea of the psychology and aesthetics, because ultimately self-service is comprised of 3 elements. It's software, it's hardware, and it's actually the delivered service around it. And I think once you wrap all those elements up, it's very subjective. And in doing so, you create and provoke a reaction, not only within your businesses when you introduce self-service, but also from your customers, the end users, which interestingly for all of us, we are the end users, because we all, at some point, I would imagine, have used self-service. And I would be interested to know, is there anybody in the room today who has not used any kind of self-service? Yeah. We probably didn't realise it, but if I'd asked you that question 5 years ago, maybe 40%, 45% of you wouldn't have put your hands up. Or I should say, would have put your hands up. It's ubiquitous, it's absolutely everywhere. So, what is self-service? I'll put some examples up in there. You'll notice in my presentation, there's lots of pictures. I work well with pictures, I can talk around them. And for a subject matter like this, it's vitally important that wherever possible, I'm positioning this within an environment that you can relate to. And there's some great examples in here, whether it's an airport kiosk, whether it's a supermarket kiosk, whether it's wayfinding. It's the good, it's the bad, it's the ugly. It's a subjective concept as to what a kiosk actually is and what part that plays in self-service. Interesting that in the early days of self-service, we probably all experienced an ATM. That's self-service. Maybe we went to the London Underground and bought a travel card. That's self-service. Maybe we went to British Rail and bought a train ticket. Self-service. Lots of interesting things that have happened in the 80s and into the 90s have fed into this. Obviously, one of the greatest accelerants of it was the uptake in supermarkets for self-checkout, and then following neatly behind that, banking, bringing kiosks in store. And I think leisure has also, kind of been an evangelist of self-service in terms of check-in and check-out. Wherever there's a process that involves people, there's an opportunity to improve that process and augment it with technology. More often than not, that will be self-service. So I wanted to bring up 2 pictures here, the House of Fraser and Harrods, 2 different methods of self-service. Interrelated to that, I wanted to talk about the interwoven applications of self-service. I think we all understand the idea that a kiosk in an airport or a kiosk in a retail environment offers self-service, but also, we need to be aware that self-service actually began in the home. One of the greatest interfaces of the business to the individual through self-serviceisation was actually e-commerce. What we've actually discovered with many organisations, yourselves included, who I know there are people who already have introduced self-service very successfully, is that there is this symbiotic relationship where the home and the retail environment link arms together, and what bridges those two environments is actually the interface itself, the software application, whether it's the e-commerce application that is actually reaching out from store into the home and allowing people to buy and transact in the comfort of their own home, or whether actually it's the converse is the case, where in actual fact you take the home into the retail environment. House of Fraser, the top picture, is a great example of that. They decided to build a concept store for self-service that had no product in it. Their idea was that they wanted to create an environment that would feel so familiar and would be so engaging and such a sensory experience that people would dwell and spend time in there, and that the distinction or the blurring between home and retail would actually evaporate and it would become one. And it's an important idea that when you're actually trying to build some confidence in your brand in home, and also extending that to a wider range of services and products in store, that there simply needs to be that cocooning of brand and awareness in the minds of the individual. The second point down here, the second image, is actually from Harrods, and this is a Nike kiosk. And I put this up because it's quite interesting. I did some research earlier on in the year where I visited 900 stores to actually find out about self-service. One particular area that was of great interest to me was footwear. So I spent quite a lot of time, actually, with the permission of various stores, observing user behaviour, the consumer's behaviour, in terms of how they interact with technologies in store and also the demographic information. And what was interesting about that was over 70% of people who bought shoes did not buy shoes on their own. They always brought at least one person with them. In 40% of the case, they brought two or more people with them. Now, Nike know this. And that kiosk there is a fantastic tool, because that kiosk is a transparent screen and behind it is a generic trainer. Now that superimposes on top of that, via the transparent screen, different styles, whether it's the sole, whether it's actually the tongue, whether it's the lacing, the colour combination of materials, all that kind of things. That is actually aimed at the person who isn't buying the shoes. It's aimed at the idler, the friend who came along to actually accompany that person while they bought the shoes. So imagine a scenario, my pal's sitting there, he's trying shoes on, I'm playing away at this kiosk, I'm simply looking at all the variants and saying, man, you should try this in blue, it looks wicked in blue. Enter stage left, shop assistant, would you like to see the blue one, sir? Yeah, okay, why not? Okay. What else can you see? Orange sole, these look great in an orange sole. Again, enter stage left, yeah, we've got those with an orange sole. This idea that a kiosk doesn't necessarily have to be purely transactional, that it's simply an interface, an engaging tool. For all of us, we've gone through a process in the last 6-7 years of appreciating a smartphone and appreciating the touch interface. And now, for many businesses, this has moved on to expanding that and increasing its overall size. And whether it's through gesture interface, or whether it's through interactive digital signage, or whether it's through implanted immersive pieces of self-service technology, what you're left with is an interface that's actually quite engaging, and it delivers information. And it's information that you want your customers to see, not information that they can find themselves on their smartphone. This is information that will actually ensure that you position yourselves most favourably. I thought it was quite interesting. I like that kiosk. So some of the other state-of-the-art systems that are in there, I would hope that all of you at some point have experienced at least some of these. John Lewis, Click and Collect, great system. M&S, this is a new one that's online. It's been running for over a year now. It's going. It's a fantastic system. Go and take a look at it. Try it out. Burberry's a classic example of how an organisation actually can turn itself around despite all the, kind of issues with, kind of what's going on with the stock market. Actually, there's some guys who are bold enough to actually stand up and say, we need to embrace technology, we need to do it now. And we're not only going to do that, but we're going to actually put it into one of the flagship stores belonging to one of our competitors, and we're going to reposition ourselves on the inside, leaving the fascia on the outside the same, and people will not recognise what we once were to what we are now. And it's actually been hugely successful. I can't afford to shop in Burberry, but I can afford to enjoy the experience of going in, taking clothes, using the RFID tags, interacting with the signage. It's fantastic. It's just, the nerd in me just kind of oozes, as you can tell. Other good stuff, House of Fraser, which I've already spoken to, Store of the Future, brilliant. Debenhams Extra, that's been out quite a while now, hugely successful. Again, lots of great self-service that's going on there. So, I mentioned earlier about the research that I've been doing. Yeah, 879 stores I visited. That was a work of ages. But it was fascinating. Check out the stats on this. 81% have no customer engagement technology, okay? So when I say customer engagement, I'm talking about self-service kiosks, digital signage and tablet assist, yeah? So that's quite startling. Only 4% of major retailers in the UK actually have self-service. Compare that to the US where it's 9%. They do say that in the UK we're slightly behind the US in most things. The gap actually between the UK and the US is actually shrinking all the more. We live in a global environment. In terms of understanding the opportunity and really, is this something that we should be playing in? Look at the numbers. VDC did some research. In 2011, global sales of $602 million. They're looking at 84% growth in the next 4 years. That's significant. Once we actually reach this plateau level in 2016, where it's $1 billion industry, there may be people who would look at self-service and say, so at what point did we decide we shouldn't have been doing that? Will it be at the point at which the business has been folded up, or will it be at the point of the business making that crossroads moment in terms of a strategic change in direction? The opportunity really is here and now for you. The great and the good have engaged, and what that form factor looks like I'll go on to explain a little later on. So, Frost & Sullivan, great research organisation. They conducted this piece of research. I've got to say, it's a huge piece of research, and I just picked out 3 things that I thought were quite interesting. Any of this information, any of the stats, all the white papers, I can make available to any of you guys. Just contact Lindsay in marketing. All of that will be made available for you, okay. But these 3 things that I thought were great. The top item, customer satisfaction. When it comes to self-service, the measurement of success is actually in customer satisfaction. You would expect that to be the case, but see, it's strengthened by 72% of retailers suggesting that. The second point, when it comes to a customer experience, how well self-service is provided for also impacts on its success. And again, 72% of people actually said that how you do your self-service is important. I'm going to come on to a little bit more about how you do it in a little bit of time, okay? The final point, cost reduction. This is a great one. This has been the stalwart of why businesses should introduce self-service for many years, and I agree with it wholeheartedly, but it's only part of the story. I'll go into later on the other elements that make it up. But the third item, cost reduction via self-service, it is a critical measure of success for most organisations where there is an expectation on any kind of capital expenditure showing a return on that investment. You need to make sure it happens for you. So, responding to usage, this particular slide looks at the idea of the lonely kiosk. So the lonely kiosk you've seen in a business where they thought self-service is a great idea, absolutely love it. Yeah, we'll put one kiosk, put it in the corner, put it over there, absolutely fine. The lonely kiosk never gets a fingertip on its screen because the lonely kiosk has never formed part of a true self-service strategy. It's been put in because there's a space, and it's been put in because there's a perception that we should be doing self-service, but the degree to which you position self-service within your organisation can be as powerful as the application of self-service in itself. So what we know about self-service, there are 4 elements to it. It will reduce operational costs. That's a given. If you're in a service environment where there's a multitude of different possibilities that can all be turned into a simple piece of software, then what you can do is convert your staff from being straightforward computational machines to be customer-facing evangelists of brand and allow them to assist people by the use of self-service to explore a much wider range of products in store. A kiosk, it works 24/7. If you're using gesture, it works behind a piece of glass when the business is closed. It never takes sick time. In theory, it has infinite capability because it has access to all information. In terms of the Internet of Things, if you've ever heard of that idea, where every piece of technology that can connect to the Internet, in theory, adds to the overall understanding and the architecture of intelligence and can benefit from that. And indeed, with our partners at Microsoft and Intel, we're exploring that very idea of how intelligence can be built into software and how it feeds upon itself. That actually delivers more tasks in less time for you. Why does it do that? It's because the machine can work infinitely faster than a human being. And there is an expectation from the consumer's point of view with self-service that what it delivers is the same every time. Now, the idiosyncrasies of people are that they don't always perform at the same level every time. And in a service environment where the opportunity is for individual perceptions of what was being asked by the customer and the interpretation of that and the way they put that information across introduces variability. It also introduces complexity that can slow down a service. And in reality, what are we trying to do? We're actually, in many cases with self-service, we're simply trying to bust a queue. We're trying to either improve the overall capability and perception of the business by a wider range of products, and/or you're simply trying to improve the time it takes to actually convert interest into a sale. The next part of this, which is kind of an in-industry thing, is community of practice. Have anybody in the room ever experienced a kiosk with a little piece of paper on it saying out of order? Yeah. If I ever see them, I take them off. I do. Yeah, I do. Most kiosks, 99% of kiosks, a high proportion of kiosks come with intelligence that means the service organisations such as Box Technologies know that the kiosk is likely to require service ahead of it becoming inoperable. So that means that that tiny piece of paper is an afterthought. Now, that tiny piece of paper can be the most frustrating thing in a business who thrives on self-service, because that tiny piece of paper suggests that that kiosk is broken, therefore it's an invalid platform in terms of transactions and business intelligence. I can't rely on that, so therefore if I see a similar kiosk in a different environment, can I trust that? So the community of practice suggests that we as an organisation, Box Technologies, and the other players, our group within the industry, should be delivering self-service products into the marketplace that do not fail. And if there is any level of failure, the engineer is on site before there's any operational downtime. If we can do that, then our community of practice will ensure that for you guys, with your self-service applications, you don't inherit collateral damage from those organisations who actually haven't put forward a service plan that require that kind of level of uptake. The final point is patronage, and it kind of feeds into that. I did some research at a leisure company long ago. They had a great suite of self-service kiosks across a whole load of sites. Really nice kiosks, great service that they were offering, but they just could not understand why people wouldn't use the kiosk. It's almost as if they would rather go up and use a manned counter before using the kiosk. Why could that possibly be the case? And I'm going to come on to that in a minute, because it's actually human nature. People like people. And unless people have experienced the technological advantage of self-service, quite often they're not going to walk forward and do it. Particularly in the example of this consultancy that I did, when the kiosks themselves were positioned outside. So you would walk into the main area for you to do your transactions, and you would see lots of man counters. So logically, you would walk straight up and do your transaction. After you'd completed that, took your goods, walked around the corner, there's kiosks there. I just queued up for 10 minutes. If only I'd known there were kiosks there, I would have tried those kiosks. Positioning and location of kiosks, as well as the design and the interface itself, all play their part in the psychology. I'm going to come on to that now. This. Anybody heard of Piggly Wiggly? It's brilliant, isn't it? Piggly Wiggly. Only in 1916 could a business called Piggly Wiggly exist. Piggly Wiggly is the very first self-service. Piggly Wiggly is the origins of a great many supermarkets. Clarence Saunders, this very straight-faced guy here, he was around the same time as Henry Ford, and his belief, like Henry Ford's belief in terms of mass manufacture, was the idea that actually people are an untapped resource, and what you should be doing is trying to create value out of those people that are otherwise simply passive to the experience. So this guy, through Piggly Wiggly, introduced the shopping trolley. He introduced these aisles. He introduced shelving, price tags. He introduced this idea that you would actually go and collect the things yourself, and it wouldn't be somebody in an apron or an overall that would go and do that for you. Now, self-service, in essence, is no more than that. Self-service actually is what threshold do we have for co-creating the transaction? As individuals, as consumers, what part do we play, and how willing are we to actually be involved in the transaction environment? You guy, Arkwright, remember Arkwright? Yeah, we all remember his piece of technology that he had, the killer till. It's an interesting thing. Why have we actually reached that point of moving from the Arkwright world into the automated aisle? And you see there's an example of that. It's one form of self-service. In 1916, when Piggly Wiggly introduced this idea of do-it-yourself, wonderfully took off. Then we had the Second World War, which interrupted that. At the end of the Second World War, we had a wonderful supply chain that up until that point had been designed to deliver munitions. It changed. It suddenly became commerce. And actually, fresh goods and imported products started to travel on those same lines around the world. Now, what that generated was abundance. It gave us choice. It gave us freedom to decide what shops we go into and what products we would want to choose. It allowed us to ally ourselves with one particular flavour or one particular colour over another. And also it introduced this idea, it speeded things up. It meant that things could be picked and packed and shipped and bought and consumed much quicker. And that meant that it improved the overall cycle of commoditisation. Now that in itself, that's a business piece. But in doing so, that rewired our brains, and the people that we are today, our generation and the generation before that, are very different people to the guys who were around in 1916. Now the next generation that are coming through, the smartphone crazy guys of this world, they are again experiencing this same level of rewiring. So with self-service, if you are going to encourage the individuals to make their fingertip touch the screen, and for the next generation, absolutely fine. They live and breathe this stuff. I've got a 12-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. Their fingers are not off their smartphones or off a tablet. They're obsessed with these things. It's second nature. When they go up to an interface, the first thing they'll do is they expect it. They don't go up and prod it with one finger thinking, is it touch? They go up instinctively with two fingers and expect to be able to do things with it. That's the nature of things, okay? But what goes into other generations is actually this mind play that happens at that moment when you're in front of a kiosk and you've got a decision as to whether I use a kiosk or maybe I'll just go and queue it with everybody else. There's two things happening. You're trying to work out how useful is this kiosk to me? Will it deliver what I'm expecting it? And the second point is, well, it's going to be really hard, isn't it? I've never used a kiosk before. It's going to be a nightmare. Surely it's going to be hard. In reality, it isn't. I did a research piece for a local government organisation who had introduced kiosks maybe 5 months ago. And I spoke to many people at length about the elements in there. How effective was it? How efficient was the service in your mind when you use that kiosk? Did it actually form, kind of any part in your decision making as to whether you use it again? Is this an important service that the council has actually provided for you? And then the second part of it, in terms of ease of use, being DDA compliant is hugely important in self-service. But also the other elements that go with that, not only how we position all of the technology, the interface itself, but the mental side of it, how we design our software. How complex or simple is that? And are we able to have a sense of mastery over this thing that's in front of us? For the majority of people, the first, in this particular consulting that I did, the first time they used the kiosk, they asked for assistance. But only because they thought they were doing it wrong, and they weren't. They just hadn't worked out the interface. The second time they used a kiosk, they only needed to know that there was an individual there to call upon if they needed some help, but the majority were able to complete their transactions. The third time, straight through. And that's the reality of self-service. And for many organisations, when they introduce self-service, it's part of an assisted selling solution. You can move it from a manned service to an assisted service to an entire self-service in iterative stages. But along the way, you simply have to educate the people who are coming in to use your services. If you don't, there's every possibility that they'll just go, I'm out. This is just too much for me. So that, in essence, is what self-service anxiety is. It's as much, I could replace self-service with technology. This is technology anxiety. When we look at how the interface exists between the consumer and the business, with self-service in the middle acting as a bridge, what are we actually doing? We're role changing. We're making the consumer suddenly become part of the business because they're partly transacting this process. But at the same time, we're also repositioning the staff because they're no longer just there as a till assistant or a cashier. They're repositioning themselves. Instead of taking money, they're now offering information and assistance on there. And that's a really powerful thing to have within your organisation if you can reposition your staff, but in actual fact, deliver exactly the same thing. The second point of past experience affecting our intentions, again, goes back to that tiny little piece of paper on this bloody screen that says out of order. Okay, it does play on people's minds. Not everybody, but if you have a great experience, there's every possibility that they will go on and use self-service in another environment. The sense of mastery, it will lead to reuse. It's as simple as that. How you design your interface, a software interface this is, has a huge impact on whether or not people are actually feel empowered by the experience. And just as importantly, are they prepared to suggest to other people that they should use self-service? Because it's the highest form of recommendation that you can get is when somebody says, go and use a kiosk, it's brilliant. It's so much quicker. It's superb. Oh, I bought it from the kiosk. You can queue up and get it from there. Just do it through a kiosk. Stuck my card in, done. Superb. The final point on this is the need for human interaction. As we move from this idea of person to computer with an intermediary, we simply must ensure that the interface feels comfortable for the user. So this is why we're going through in technology in general, this transmogrification of what that interface looks like. In terms of kiosk, a kiosk always used to look like a monolithic piece of technology with a screen in that position and the other technologies down there. Actually, that's not the case anymore. Self-service kiosks now can actually be different shapes and sizes. They can have different screen orientations because we now accept that a screen, in all likelihood, in store, if it's positioned at head height, is interactive. And that feeds into the idea of provocative technology. If you're going to introduce technology, there are a few things that really you should consider, and certainly for Box Technologies, this is right at the core of our self-service offering. The understanding and the belief that actually, if you're going to get self-service to work, then you simply have to make sure you design a unit that fits into the business and fits into the paradigm of your customer. If they understand it as being a self-service unit, they will use it. But if it looks like something that's been beamed down from another planet or indeed dug up out of the ground and put into the corner of your retail environment, you won't get individuals coming over to do that. So part of the experience and service delivery that we offer is where we actually sit and think about what that interface should be in terms of the soft and the hard. Because great software will captivate the mind. Lousy software, we've all got smartphones, we've all got iPads, we've all got hopefully the new Windows Surface when it comes out. All of these things are driven by one thing, and that's software. Software kills or makes king any device. And I urge you to consider that. And in the future, when we can all discuss self-service in the round, we'll realise that the hardware and the software formed, quite a strong link in our ability to make, kind of some sense of, where it's going. The positioning of it, it's an interesting one that I kind of touched on a little earlier. This idea that the lonely kiosk in the corner never gets used, or the bank of kiosks around the corner that never get used. How you position it, literally, not in a marketing sense, not in that sense of positioning, but the physical positioning, the prominence that you give to your self-service is hugely important. You're going to need to look at the likes of Marks and Spencer's. They're not messing around. When they put their kiosks in, right in the middle of the whole retail area, they are making an overt demonstration of the importance of self-service. And for any organisation that goes through the strategic change to employ hardware through self-serviceisation, if they do not position those units in a place that will increase patronage and demonstrate to the consumer how seriously they take self-service, it won't get used. It's as simple as that. Final point on that, mentioned it earlier, customer satisfaction. It does lead to referral. Referral is so hugely important. So for Box Technologies, kind of summing all that up, I wanted to kind of pick out the points and kind of reiterate what I've just gone through. In terms of our design consultancy, this really is about understanding the customer and the customer's customer and the customer's customer's customer. That value chain, right the way through to the end user, is hugely important. And to understand that first means that you start off with a blank sheet of paper, you do your research, you understand what the process is likely to be, and then you begin to imagineer. And imagineering is the concept of understanding possibility, matching it with capability, and then using the internal resources within Box Technologies and our partners at Intel, at Microsoft, at Von Bismarck, and other good companies to actually ensure that what we deliver is a compelling self-service solution for you. So you'll see we take it through the design consultancy, through to the product creation. Product creation, hard and soft, by the way. There's a big, kind of perception that a product is tangible. It can be intangible. What is software? Is software a product? I believe that it is. Without software, there is no self-service solution, let me tell you that. So we go through an extended period of productization of the software as well as the hardware, because it's all interlocking, these elements all interlocking together, which then feeds onto the system integration. So in a system integration, we're taking the best of breed in terms of componentry, in terms of software integration, in terms of the materials, whether it's tactile, kind of paint finishes, or whether it's strong metals, or whether it's brand new polymers, aerospace materials, metamaterials, whatever it may be. All of those things need to coexist with actually the componentry in there. And as all that kind of stuff swirls around, it manifests itself in products. Those products need to be installed. They're put into a site, they're integrated into a business system, they're monitored, they're looked after, until such a point as they need to be upgraded. And all our hardware is designed specifically for upgrade in mind. And the reason for that is there's 12 to 15 years of continual growth in self-service. And in that time, there's every likelihood that the main components for change are small components. And therefore, anything that you design, you can increase the longevity of the self-service solution by hot swapping. And I know that later on we'll talk about hot swapping in another presentation. So as that feeds down, it delivers products. So along the bottom, some great examples of products that we've been developing. We've got Stealth, we have Magnum, we have the Ice Wall, and Ice Wall's actually at the back there. We have the Ice Plinth, and we have the Hepworth. And these are, as much as anything, demonstrations of our willingness to explore what our customers want. And what goes with that is this subjective opinion as to what is a kiosk. And why I've put that range up there is they are all kiosks, but not in everybody's eyes. But the beauty of what we deliver is something that will ensure that the self-service solution you need can be delivered and can be supported by Box.